great. This is either the moment you've all been waiting for or that you're absolutely dreading, talking about sales and marketing. And I think why it's important is that if you're successful at doing what you do, the whole continuous improvement, if you have great success at that, then to have a bottom line effect, you either are going to have to cut your operating expenses, which means lay off people, or you're going to have to be able to sell the capacity you just revealed. And it's frankly no fun laying off people, so let's talk about selling it. And so what I'm going to share with you today are some of our lessons learned on how to do that. And we're going to talk both about the concept of a Mafia Offer, but I'm even going to share with you, we've developed Mafia Offers for some clients, and guess what? The sales still didn't come. Now what? What do you do then? So we'll actually go through some of the other problems besides just the Mafia Offer, and then talk about the solutions. Now, before I get into the presentation, I kind of like to set the framework, set the groundwork, start by asking you one key question, which is, why should I buy from you? How do you answer that today? Because that's our starting point. We're working from there to potentially a good offer. So what I'd like to do is I want to give you about 30 seconds, talk to the person next to you, and then I'd like for you to come up with how you might answer that today. What is it that you'd say? Would you talk about your quality? Would you talk about your innovation? Tell me what you would say today. So let's take about 30 seconds, and at the end of the 30 seconds, I'm going to start talking, which is your cue to quiet down and come back up here because it's going to be way more exciting up here, all right? So let's take 30 seconds. Talk at your table. Why should I buy from you, all right? All right, did you guys come up with some good reasons? Let's hear some of the reasons that you came up with. Why should I buy from you? What did you guys come up with?
Because we'll increase your profitability.
Well, that's a good one. What else?
Because I retain data rights and you can't buy it from anybody else.
Can't buy it from anybody else. What else?
Performance.
Performance. We have great performance. Anybody else? We have quality nobody else has. All right? What else? Price. We have the lowest price or the highest price. Something about price. All right? What else? Hello? There's no salespeople in this room. You wouldn't have stopped that soon. All right, so the point is you say some things now, and if you're not sure what you say because you're not really in sales, look at your company presentation. There's a presentation that your salespeople, they probably go out and give, and look and see what you say. And that'll give you some idea of what's out there. Okay, so let me tell you what everyone tends to say. So I've asked this question many, many times. We've done had over 40 companies in Mafia Offer boot camps, and so I've collected some data. And I'm going to now share with you what most people say, and this list is across all kinds of industries, all kinds of companies. And here's what people say. We have great customer service. We have outstanding quality. Quality you can't get anywhere else, you might say. We have a great reputation. We get good results. We have great performance. We have the best employees. Boy, you're really going to like our employees. And we have a knowledgeable staff. We have consistent management. We're very responsive. We're very innovative, and gee, you can trust us. I call this the blah, blah, blah list. This is what your salespeople say. I call it the show up and throw up. They show up and they tell you how great they are, and it's all about you, and how great you are, and that's common. The point is, it's the same thing that your competition says. This list is across all these different types of industries and companies, and this is what everybody's saying. Now, there's variations on the theme, and you might change it up a little bit, but this is what most people are saying. which means we have right off the bat problem number one. You sound the same as your competitors. And if you sound the same as your competitors, why not just buy on price? Is there really any reason? If you're all the same, I might as well just pick based on price. Yes, I know you all say, but yes, our quality is a little bit better than everybody else's, and we're more innovative than the other guys. But you all sound the same to me. So I'm sure you might be right, but I'll just buy on price. So they tell us with their actions that they don't really believe all the stuff that we're saying. So let's talk about the solution to this first one then. How do we sound different? Well, my answer is create a Mafia Offer. Now, a Mafia Offer is an offer so good, when your customers hear it, they can't refuse it, first part of it. Second, your competition can't or won't offer the same thing. So for me, price would never be a Mafia Offer because how fast can your competition copy your price? Almost instantly if they want to. So it has to be something unrefusable to your customer, but that your competition can't or won't match, at least not for some period of time. Because if you guys are successful at uncovering quite a bit of capacity, we got a lot of capacity to sell, and we want to sustain that competitive advantage for some period of time. So the solution is attend a Mafia Offer bootcamp, but those take 3 days. We have an hour. So what I'm going to give you are some of the guidelines and some of the things that we do, kind of the summary of what we do in the bootcamp. So here's what we do to develop a Mafia Offer. We consider 3 things. The first thing that we look at is we look at your capabilities, either what they are or what they could be compared to the competition. That's the first thing. The second thing is we look at how your industry sells whatever it is that you sell. Now that would be a different for each one of you, but how is it that your industry sells? Because you and your competitors, not only do you come and say the blah, blah, blah stuff, but you all tend to sell. You all tend to have the same policies, procedures, and measures in place and sell the same way. And then the third thing that we look at is how these 2 things impact your specific customers. How is it that your customers are impacted by the typical performance and practices, and how are your customers impacted by how your industry tends to sell what you sell? Now, the easiest thing to probably do is to give you an example. So let me give you an example. This happens to be a label company example, and what was interesting about these guys is they were using theory of constraints. They had done some setup reduction. They had already had some pretty good results before I got there. And in fact, they'd gone from a 4 to 6 week lead time down to 2 weeks. Not bad on their own. And they had gone from a due date performance of about mid-70s all the way up to 90%. Okay, pretty good. And they had not laid off one person. So their constraint had moved. It was initially internal at the printing press, and now it had moved to the market. And they hadn't laid off anybody. Okay? So I come in, and one of the first things I ask is I ask them to tell me about their success because they were very proud of it and they were happy to share their story, and they had so much excess capacity they had time to tell me about it. So they started telling me about their success, and I said, so you really have quite a bit of excess capacity. And they said, oh yeah, that's why you're here. We have tons of excess capacity. Okay, great. If that's true, I've got one question for you. If you have all this excess capacity, why is it that your due date performance is only 90%? Do you see the disconnect? There was something that wasn't exactly right. They had implemented drum buffer rope scheduling, but something wasn't exactly right. So I said, well, show me what you've done. So they take me out and they show me, here are the constraints. The constraint is the printing press, and they had several printing presses all lined up, and these are our constraints. It's the printing department. Okay, great. Now, I didn't even have to ask about the buffer or tying the rope because you could see that it was already done. In front of each press, there was actually a cart that had the next roll to run the next set of labels. And so I knew that they had a buffer, and I also knew that they'd tied the rope because there weren't 10 carts in front of each press, but instead there was 1. So I knew that they had done that. And usually what most people miss is the tying the rope piece. That tends to be the tough piece to do. So I had to think about it for a minute, and finally I said, okay, well, show me your buffer statistics. And they said, our buffer who? You know, every time you go into the red zone of the buffer, those Ys that you're supposed to be tracking, and that you use that to focus your continuous improvement, and that's how you decide where to do your Lean and Six Sigma initiatives based on those Ys, show me that. That's what they weren't doing. So what we did is start to implement the buffer statistics. And in doing that, we further reduced their lead time down to 2 days and got their due date performance to over 99%. Now, the reason I pushed them to further improve, because as I was asking the questions for the first part to develop the Mafia Offer, what are their capabilities compared to the competition? Their lead time was 2 weeks. And their due date performance was mid-90s. And when I said, well, how does that compare to the competition? They said, well, it's really the same. We don't know for sure what our competitors are doing, but we would know if we were much worse or much better. And what we're hearing back from our customers is that it's about the same. Okay, so you're the same as your competitors again. So the reason we pushed for an additional improvement was because we wanted to be better than the competition in the performance. So we got down to 2 days of lead time and due date performance to over 99%. That took about 3 months to implement the buffer statistics. The second area we look at is the industry and how your industry sells whatever you sell. Now, if you've ever bought labels or anything printed, you're probably familiar with how the printing industry sells. They use something called a price quantity curve. You know, it kind of looks like this. And if you want this price, no problem, you need to buy a bazillion labels. Oh, you only want one label? No problem, here's the price. Are you guys familiar with the price quantity curve? So everybody in the industry uses that. Now, the third area we look at to develop the Mafia Offer is how your specific customers are impacted by this performance, the typical performance being 2-week lead time and about 90% due date performance, and how they're impacted by this price quantity curve. So I started asking about who their typical customers were. And we used, as an example, a coffee roaster. Now, a coffee roaster looks at the price quantity curve, and they say, I want this price. No problem, the label company says, we'll even let you spread that volume, which happened to be about 6 months worth of labels, across all the labels that you want to buy. Now, labels are pretty small, they're relatively inexpensive, so 6 months worth was pretty typical. So they said, okay, well, we'll spread that across all that 6 months. Now, to do that, they have to forecast how much of each type of coffee they sell in all the various sizes they sell, and there were 100 different labels they needed to buy. Now, in order to decide how many of each of the 100, they do this forecast. Now, if you only know one thing about a forecast, what do you know? It's wrong. The question is how much and in which direction, but we know that it's going to be wrong. So I checked. I go into the customer service department of the label company, and I ask them, hey, does it ever happen that you get a frantic call from a customer who is stocked out, and they have to have it, and they have to have it fast? And they said, oh, yeah, we get those calls all the time. What's all the time? And they said, we get 2 to 3 of those calls a week. Interesting. Well, I said, does the opposite also happen where, you know, they're supposed to be buying 6 months worth of labels, but they haven't ordered a certain label for like 9 months or longer? Oh, yeah, that happens as well. In fact, you know that coffee roaster you were asking about, just last week they called. They had stocked out a Colombian roast, and they were frantic and asked us to expedite it. And while we had them on the phone, we said, we've noticed that you haven't bought French roast in over 9 months. Would you like to place an order for that as well? They said, we have enough French roast labels for our grandchildren. So they had too many of some labels, were stocking out of others. So we took all of that and created the following Mafia Offer. Now I'm going to tell you what their Mafia Offer is, not because I think it will work for you. In fact, you have to apply those 3 things to your specific company and your specific customers. So even if you're a label company, this may not work for you. Fair enough? That's the legal disclaimer at the bottom. Okay, so here's the offer. Mr. Customer, don't give me orders. Your orders are based on your best guess of what you might need based on your forecast. We put that price quantity curve out there and force you to have to forecast out 6 months. And the forecast ends up being wrong, and how could it possibly be right? Instead, tell us every day how many labels you use. Now, if you'll do that, I'll guarantee on the one hand you won't have to hold more than 2 weeks worth of labels. And you know how your marketing departments always want to put Spider-Man on the label 1 week and a couple weeks later put The Incredibles, but you can't do it because you have 6 months worth of inventory? You only have 2 weeks. Now, at the same time, we'll guarantee that we never stock you out. And if we ever do, if you ever go to the shelf and not have the label you need, we'll pay you $500 per day per label. Now, is that a Mafia offer? Well, let's test it. Is it unrefusable to the customer? They go from 6 months of inventory to 2 weeks with guaranteed availability backed up with a penalty. Either you guys are a tough audience or you don't need labels or something, right? That's pretty good. Okay, just checking. So the second test is, can the competition match it? All right, how much inventory are we asking the customer to hold? 2 weeks. What is our competition's lead time? 2 weeks. 2 weeks and about 90%, assuming that they were the same as we were. There's no way they can match it and not have to pay substantial penalties. What's our lead time? 2 days. Should we ever have to pay penalties? Not if we're paying attention. So that's a Mafia offer in what's considered to be a commodity industry. They assured me when we started that this was a commodity industry. All right, so let's talk about some of the advantages then, some of the benefits of a Mafia offer. Now you can imagine if you're that label company and you have that Mafia offer, it sets the entire strategy and tactics for the company. It's your positioning in the marketplace. It tells you what improvements internally you're going to need to make, and it forces, if you want to make that offer, it forces the operational improvements in order to deliver that offer, and it gives you a reason to do it. We started these boot camps in 2006, and one of the interesting things that we found is that by doing them first, we got the operational changes faster because now we had a reason to change. It wasn't change for change's sake or improvement for improvement's sake. It was, if we make these improvements, man, we're going to be able to go out with that great offer. So that was a huge benefit. It also changes the culture of the company. You know, we celebrate whenever we have to pay a penalty. It doesn't happen that often. But that's some of the best money you're going to spend. When you know exactly where to focus your improvement, now we know. And it can recession-proof or at least minimize the impact a recession can have on you. Because with a good offer, your close rate, your conversion rate goes up. And if you have more control, if your conversion rate goes up substantially, it's much easier to survive a recession. And if you can survive a recession and you come out still profitable, all kinds of opportunities open up as far as acquisitions and things like that. You're in a pretty good position. And then, of course, the combination of these operational improvements with the Mafia offer, huge bottom line benefits. As you know, if you uncover the capacity and then you can sell it, the bottom line impacts are huge. Now, I wish I could say that Mafia offer solves all your problems. It doesn't, but most companies that I run into do have this problem. They have the blah, blah, blah syndrome. They don't do a good job of positioning themselves and explaining their current offer. But solving it, having just the Mafia offer, does not necessarily lead to more sales. We've learned this from experience. But starting with this, first creating the offer, then you can see what some of the other issues are. See, if you don't have a good offer, then I can't tell why something may not be working. You could really have an issue somewhere else in your sales process, but without a good offer, it's masked. I can't tell where it is. So we start with this first one by solving it, and then I want to share with you some of the other problems that we've seen. So in these cases, these are people who already had pretty darn good Mafia offers, and then these were some of the other common things that we ran into, even though we had a great Mafia offer. Okay, so these are the most common ones. They're not in any particular order, but the first one is getting in. I have a great offer. I'm all excited. I go back, and nobody will grant me an appointment. I cannot get in to see anybody. How frustrating would that be? That happens in about 30% of the cases. The number of prospects you have. Look, I can get in. I just don't have very many of them. I saw all one of my prospects last month. The number of them, the sheer number, you don't have enough. And your target market can be a potential problem. So either how you define it or the fact that you might have a large percentage of your current market. All the other factors besides your Mafia offer can become a problem. You already fixed the operational stuff, so you really start concentrating on the sales, and oops, due date performance starts to slide. Quality starts to slide. So we start to drop off on some of the other things, the things that we were really good at. And then finally, how the offer is presented. And I would have to say that this is probably the most common. When I get the call that says, my offer is not working, usually it's the last one. So what we're going to do is go through each one of these in a little more detail, and then I'll give you some of the solutions that we've come up with. They're not exhaustive, and if you have ideas and solutions, I'd love to hear your stories as well. So the first one, getting in. Is getting in to see the right people getting more difficult? They're blockades, right? We have all this technology now, and we can't even talk to a real person on the phone. They've got voicemail. You know, maybe we can send them a fax, but there's all these technological blockades now. There's spam filters, and boy, it makes it really tough to even get to the right person. And even if you do get there physically, they usually have some sort of an assistant or somebody whose job it is to make sure that you don't get in to see them. So there are all these blockades that are there, and you start to look at, well, how are these impacting your business? You might know exactly who the prospects are that you want to go after. You know exactly who they are. You know the names of them, and you can't get in to see them. And so your sales cycle just starts to lengthen. And if your sales cycle is lengthening, chances are so is your cash cycle. So it can have a pretty dramatic effect on your business itself. And do we have a plan or a process for these problems? Is it even resolvable? Is there even a solution to this type of problem? There's not really a lot of people talking about the problem of getting in and how we do it. And what do you use now? What I hear when I ask people, how is it that you're getting in? I'll hear something like, well, we do the research, we send a letter, and we call, or we might research and call. Those are pretty common. And how's that working for you? It tends to be tough. And then who is this process targeted at? Can you give me a title of who you're targeting? Somebody want to give me a title of somebody that they target? Are there any salespeople in here? Who is it? Quality Assurance Manager, the VP. Okay, we know the title of the person that we want to get in to see, don't we? If I ask any of you, who is it that you target, you give me the title. I need to see the Director of Operations. If I can get in front of the Director of Operations, I can close this. I hear that all the time. But the last question is, do people make decisions alone or in groups? In groups. Have you ever been successful, you got in, you made the presentation, they loved it, and the person said, that was fantastic. Can you come back next week, and I need to get so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so in the room? You hit it out of the park, and they want to bring more people because they don't make decisions alone. They're not going to make this decision. It's going to be a group decision, and yet, notice when we market, you gave me a title. We tend to target one person. So when we do our marketing, when we do our sales, we tend to market to one person, and yet we don't make decisions that way. So there needs to be a better way. So here's the solution that we use. We say, okay, you have this target, and you can tell me who the title is. But we've agreed we make decision in groups. So what we want to do is create a circle of leverage around this target and use the politics that goes on. Actually, politics can be a positive thing. And we're actually going to use them to get into our target. Here's what we do. So we have our vice president of manufacturing or whoever it is that we fill in here. We want to know who two lateral people are, two colleagues of this person on the same level. So if you're going into the VP of manufacturing, it could be the VP of finance, could be the VP of HR, might be two colleagues at the same level. Then I also want to know who the direct report is, because this is the person that when you initially try to get into them, when you target one person, that they try to pass you off to. Okay, we want to know who that is. We also want to know 2 levels above our target prospect. Now, once we have that information, we go about we use the psychology that occurs in organizations, and we use all the politics, and we send a letter, and we don't send it to one person, we send it to all of these people. Now imagine you send a letter that's so compelling, and all these people got it. If it was really well written and very compelling, what would your prospect have to do? They're going to have to respond. Because if they don't, what's their boss going to say? Why didn't you follow up on this? Right? So now we're starting to use the psychology and the politics that are already there to get in. Now, we spend 3 days doing this one, too. So that's the quick overview. And we call it the circle of leverage. All we're doing is creating this circle of leverage around who your prospect really is. And we do this in a 3-day boot camp, but we do the boot camp with the author of this book, Michael Boylan. And this book will give you, it doesn't give you everything that you get in the 3 days, but it'll certainly give you an overview. There's an example of the letter in there, and the book's worth a read. It talks about the psychology and how and why all this stuff happens, so that's one of my recommended reading for you. Now let's talk about the third problem. The prevailing strategy as far as the number of prospects is to wait for the phone to ring. They'll call. It's just slow this week, they'll call. Do you know how many people have this strategy? It's a tough strategy. The typical website does not drive traffic. They're company brochures. Have you seen a website where it just really looks kind of like their brochure? And you ask them if they're getting any traffic from it? No. Well, who are the visitors you get? Well, when somebody wants to know if we're a real company, they kind of go on and check us out. And that's been my experience of what people tend to use their websites for. And there's no list building. If you say, well, who's your list of prospects? Who is it that you're trying to go after? They don't have it. Not in all cases, okay? Some of the cases. And just to top it off, cash is tight, or there's no budget. So in smaller companies, you'll hear that their cash is tight. And in larger companies, there's no budget to really do anything about this. And in the smaller companies, the resources are limited. So the owner is also the main sales guy. And the guy who's running operations is also doing the quoting. And so you can't say, oh, by the way, now I want you to make 5 calls a day and follow up on 5 quotes a day. They don't have the time. The resources are severely limited. So how do you solve that one? Now let me tell you a little bit about my motivation to solve some of these problems. My Mafia Offer is I'll do 100% results-based consulting. If I don't solve these, I don't get paid. So I'm a little motivated here, right? I need to solve these problems because if I don't, the profits aren't going to increase and I'm not going to get paid. So how do we do it? Well, we have no resources and we have no money. So we need to certainly start with free or low-cost approaches, all right? So typically what we want to do, if you're talking about free or low-cost approaches and approaches where you're not having to expend a lot of time, what we need to do is get your prospects to come to you. Now that's a great thing to say. How do you do it? Because we all like that. Let's just get the phones ringing. Well, sure, let's just get the phones ringing. What's the problem? Well, how? How do you do it? Well, one of the things that we found is some search engine optimization stuff that tends to work. I'm going to give you kind of the bare bones of what is working. So search engine optimization, what we do is we take that website that looked like a brochure, and you can actually pretty easily get on the first page of Google doing some simple changes to the website. Now you can't, not across all the keywords that you might have, but for 1 or 2 keywords, first page of Google. That's possible. And you can do that depending on how fast the search engines index your site, usually within a week. So not too bad. We can do that piece. Now, the other thing that we've stumbled across is the use of videos and podcasts. See, if your website's only going to give you a couple keywords and people are out there searching on many, many keywords, how do we get more of them? We found out that search engines really like videos and podcasts. And in fact, they'll be indexed within minutes of submission. And what we can do is create these videos and podcasts targeting different keywords so that we start to show up more and more for a large number of keywords. Okay? And then finally, another low-cost way is, I call it the do-it-yourself pay-per-click. Now, all of these services, you could hire people for. There are people who specialize in doing this, and you can pay them. And I'm going to show you an example of one of our clients. When I asked the service, how much should we be spending on AdWords to really do this right, the answer was $800 a month. We're spending $50, okay? But that was the answer. And there are people out here who specialize in these, but they all cost money, and guess what? None of them like to get paid the way I do. Just doesn't work that way. All right, so let's look at an example. So this is one of my clients. When we started working with them, they had the typical site. It was the brochure type site. They were nowhere to be found on any of the pages on any search word. Unless you type Trusted Manufacturing Inc., you did not find them. And do your prospects search on your company name? I mean, unless they know about you, that's not going to be a common search. They had no database of prospects. They were not actively building a list of prospects. And the basic strategies was let the clients find them. We're good. I'm sure they'll find out about us. Okay? So here was their site when we first started. Now, these pictures didn't print for some reason, but what they had up here was the logo. And it was this part of their logo right here where it just said Trusted. They had that up here. And then there was a home button, a Who We Are button, services, and contacts. And the front page was a picture of the building. Woohoo! Isn't that great? Okay. You can see why they're driving so much traffic. So here's the new and improved site. And the key is that we've got a lot of keywords, all their specialties here. Their Mafia Offers front and center. And here's the owner of the company telling you about their Mafia Offer. Okay, so a little bit different. We use a really dummy-proof technology. We use something called .NET Nuke. It's an open source software. And I put this up on a Saturday. It took me a Saturday. I took the content off of their sites plus the content we developed in the boot camp, and we had this site up on a Saturday. So it's, yeah, it took a day of my time, but not again, remember, I don't get paid. We don't make this happen. So it took a Saturday, and that's what we did. Now, within a week, we were on the first page of Google. So here's the first page of Google. Here they are down here. It took about a week for it to get indexed and show up on the first page. Now again, this is only for a small section of keywords. So there were really two kind of keywords where we'd come up on the first page. And your prospects are searching on more than two. It'd be nice if we could drive them all, to the two we're on, but it doesn't happen. So what we did is we created a couple videos. So we created two videos. The first video was the owner. I was going there anyway. I took my webcam with me, set the webcam on his desk, and I said, here's some bullet points. You've got 5 minutes to read this over, and we're going to record. Okay? We recorded. We took a couple takes, and it's a 7-minute, 3-minute video. It's not very long, and it's the owner presenting basically what the offer is. The second video was just done in PowerPoint, where you record the audio. We converted both of these videos to common video type files and started uploading them to all the social networking sites. There are over 60 different social networking sites out there. We've now created a process where we can do that for our clients fairly quickly. So we uploaded this to 60 different social networking sites using different keywords than we had used on the homepage so we could drive additional traffic. Here we are. We have 4 entries on the first page of Google for now some different keywords. So this happened within 5 minutes of submission. The search engines love videos and podcasts. So within 5 minutes, we're on the first page of Google for some additional keywords. Now these sites, if you click on them, take you to the video on that hosted site. So if it was YouTube, you'd click on it, it would take you to YouTube, you'd watch the video. Now the video's got to be compelling to get you to go to their site, right? So you can't put junk out there. It's got to be compelling to get them to go. But if they go, what we found is they are now a very good prospect. They have researched your site, they watched the video, they went to the site, and now they're interested, and they call you. Wouldn't you like to get those calls? Yeah, those are better prospects. So that's what we did. Now, here's where before we started changing the website. So prior to the old website was getting no visitors. I did have to filter out their IP addresses and mine because we we were going, but they were getting no outside visitors. And now here's some of the data we're getting. We're getting about 50% traffic from search engines themselves. Referring sites, those are the people who are hosting the videos and podcasts. And then direct traffic. So these are people who may have visited, watched a video before, bookmarked our website, and have come back. They're now going direct. But now we've actually got some people coming on a regular basis to see what we're doing. Okay? Now, once we've got them there, let's keep them. So let's find out who's coming to see us. Let's offer something of value so that they tell us who they are. How about the top 10 things you'd like to know about buying metal fabricated parts? If you're a purchasing person and that was offered, I might give up my email address to find out what you have to say about that, particularly if I've invested some time in watching your video. So let's figure out a way to capture their information and then stay in contact with them. And now we're starting to build our database of prospects. So now if you are going to call, if you free up some time, let's call people who have opted in, who have raised their hand and said that they have some level of interest. So here's basically the results. We ended up setting up a newsletter, and right now we're just using the newsletter. The software includes an email campaign manager, which is really easy. So there's no cost to do this. We don't pay anything per email. It's all part of the website. They pay $25 a month for the hosting of the website. And after we were about $110 into this, we paid 1 month of Google AdWords, and we paid a couple months of hosting. I'm not sure where, it was under probably $110, and we landed an $80,000 a month prospect. In less than 30 days, called us, said they looked at the site, they loved what we had to say, could we come see them? Last week, Brad, the week before we went to see them? Recently, so this all just happened within the last couple months. We've already made a site visit, and we're expecting, I'm not going to count it as a done deal till I get the first check, but it's starting to happen. So we think we're starting to solve this one as far as getting more prospects and getting in front of them and having them be more qualified. It certainly beats cold calling. And particularly if you have really limited resource, great way to have people start calling you. So when you do have money, when you do start to increase sales, we're going to improve. We'll upgrade. We may go to professionally managed pay-per-click. We may even put more money in the paper. We're getting some results at $50 a month. Maybe the 800 is even better. This is assuming that you can handle those more sales. And lead generation, there's some interesting, depending on your type of industry, some lead generation sites where you find out who is looking for requests for proposals on different parts. So in this case, mfg.com was one that when we have some cash, we have on our list to sign up for that. Once you have some cash, you can do things like purchasing fairs. You've now built a list. We could send them postcards on a regular basis. We could do some more direct type marketing. And of course, we can continuously upgrade both the website and the videos. I'm an engineer. I'm not a graphic designer. We could get somebody in there to kind of fancy up the wording and fancy up the website and do those things. So the next problem that we tend to encounter is your market. Either how you've defined it. You've said that you have 80% market share. My question for you is, how do you define your market? If you tell me it's a 10-mile radius of your building, I'm going to suggest you might expand your market to the surrounding states. Okay? But if you have 80% of the world market, okay, that's a real issue. It's not that you can't benefit from a Mafia offer, but there's not as much room to grow. And if you're in that position, then the innovation stuff is something that you might need to look at. Let's go the innovation route. When we're dealing with Mafia offers, notice I'm not talking about innovation. This is really exploitation. I'm talking about how do you do more with what you've already got. Current customers and current markets. So, current products and current markets. So we're not trying to develop new products or new markets. Those are risky things to do. Some of you may need to do them, and that may be wise. But what we're talking about is how do we get more out of what we already have. And then targeting your offer to prospects who don't need it. So you might have a great Mafia offer, and your Mafia offer does solve some problems, but if you take it to somebody who doesn't suffer from that problem, it's not really a Mafia offer to them. So who is it that you're targeting? And then going after new customers, which tend to be longer sales cycle than existing customers. So who is it that you're targeting with your offer? And also going after the type of customers who tend to have a longer sales cycle. So not only new customers, but they're new customers and they're large organizations, and the sales cycle might be 9 months, a year, 2 years, depending on what type of product you have. Okay, so those are some of the problems we've seen in the market, and of course the solution is, well, I like to be really helpful. Develop a good market. All right, well, how do you do that? Well, here's some questions that you can ask yourself to really guide where your market should be. Who should your target market be? Where is your offer most needed? Which type of prospect has a really significant need for the problem that you solve, that is really suffering from the problem that your Mafia offer solves? That's who we want to take our offer to. And is there a market or a type of customer that has higher throughput? So if there's a place where you can get higher throughput, then that might be a place to focus as well. Is there a market or markets that can be more quickly accessed, that has a shorter sales cycle, either because the size of the customer or the nature of the industry? Are there some shorter cycle sales? And then which markets do you have tons of room to grow? Maybe all of them, maybe only certain ones. That would be good to know. And then are there current customers who have more business to give? Certainly current customers is something that can be a shorter cycle. And do you have too much business with one customer or in one industry? So if you have a customer who you could get more business with, but they're already 50% of your business, that may not be wise to go get more. So these are the questions that we want to ask. And then based on the answers to these, we want to determine a good target market and a strategy for both the short term and the long term. So it would be nice if you had a strategy that says, all right, these are shorter sales cycle people. Let's start working on some of them. But at the same time, we're going to work on some of the longer sales cycle people, and we'll have a combination so that we're going to be able to have a continuous flow. So just like in operations where we want good flow, in sales as well. So we always want somebody to be coming through that sales funnel and have a very continuous flow. And we can do that if we're smart about how we select our target markets. And then, of course, the great thing about a Mafia offer is that we don't need the new products or new markets. We're really trying to exploit what we've already got. So unless you do have 80% of the world market and you need to go new products, new markets, let's exploit what we've got. All right, so problem number 5. This was the problem where our offer is weakened by being dangerously worse in some of the other key parameters, like quality. We get so focused on our offer that we forget. We kind of forget about the quality, and we just really get focused on selling. We stop doing the metrics. We stop having the meetings. So keep an eye on the quality. Keep an eye on the price. What about the lead time and due date performance? If those start to get worse, we don't have a Mafia offer anymore. And what about customer service? So this is the potential problem. And of course, the solution is to pay attention, to measure. And you've had a number of people talk about those things today. So continue to pay attention, continue to measure, and you basically need to ensure that you don't get worse, because the worst thing that can happen, you develop a great Mafia offer, you have a penalty, and you end up having to pay the penalty. And paying the penalty defeats the whole purpose of why the offer is out there. You can do it once. You know, if you have to pay it once per customer in a year, they probably think it's great, and it probably serves to reinforce your offer. But if you're continually having to pay, and they are suffering from the problem, that's not a good thing. So we want to make sure that we make sure that we don't slip on any of these other parameters. And here's another recommended reading. It's a book called Extraordinary Guarantees. And what this book talks about are companies who offer extraordinary guarantees and how they've used those guarantees to focus the continuous improvement in their company. So it can change the culture of your company if instead of beating people up when you have to pay a penalty, but you celebrate it. You celebrate the fact that we just learned the most important thing to focus on, and you go and you make those improvements. That can have a huge culture change and have a huge impact on your company. And the last problem that we've run into is how you present it. And this is probably the most common problem that I've seen. You know, after the boot camp, I'll occasionally get these calls and somebody says, my offer doesn't work. Okay, can you tell me a little more? Tell me. I need to know, how did you present it? So that tends to be the biggest issue. The Mafia Offer presentations follow a buy-in process, and when I start to ask them, well, how did you present it? What did you do? Usually they're skipping a step in the buy-in process. The salesperson still did the show up and throw up and started with all the blah, blah, blah stuff and then tried to go to the offer. And they didn't do the whole setup of the buy-in process. They jumped to the offer. We didn't agree on the problem. We didn't agree on the direction of the solution. We just gave them our offer and said, aren't we great? So we still have to follow the process. So my recommendation is if you go back, you know your offer is good, and you're not getting the reaction you expect, record what's happening. Videotape it, audio tape it, whatever you're comfortable with. I tell people if they're on the phone, record the call. We're not using it for anything legal. We're just trying to use it for our continuous improvement. Let's find out where we're not following the process. And if we are following the process, let's find out if maybe we were off on our Mafia Offer. Maybe we missed something in our analysis, then we need that information as well. And typically, it's hard when you're looking at your own situation and looking at your own material, you don't necessarily see it. So I'll ask people, did you go and did you listen to the presentation? Did you hear what was said? And yeah, everything seemed okay to me. So it can be hard when you're talking about your own company. You've heard it done that way for so long to really see some of the problems. So it can be helpful to get a third party to kind of review what you're doing and look to see if you're really following the process. So here's another example, another client. They had attended a boot camp, and shortly after the boot camp, I got a call from the owner of the company who said, our offer's not working. Help, the offer's not working, it doesn't work. Okay, hold on, tell me what you've done. He said, well, I sent out 700 emails to contacts who already, these are people who opted in. This was a company that already had a really good website. They were already building a list. They were in regular email communication with them. These were people that they communicated with on a regular basis, not one response. Sent out the email, not one response, and these are people who know the company. Okay, well, send me the email, show me what you sent. So he sends me the email. So in there you can see the offer, but what got my attention was the subject. This is the name of the company, Puzzle Floors. The subject is Puzzle Floors. Now imagine you're one of the 700 people. You get monthly emails from this company, and you think you probably know them pretty well. Now they've just gone through boot camp. They've totally changed their offer, and you get an email that says Puzzle Floors. Do you open the email? What's different? There's nothing different. There's no reason to open. And as soon as we started having the conversation, it became obvious that unless I'm ready to buy today, unless I'm ready to buy my hardwood flooring today, I don't open that email. There's no compelling reason to open it. I might file it, but I don't open it today. So you want me to open it today? We've got to change how we do this. So anyway, we've reworked it. But that's just an example of how it's hard sometimes when you're looking at your own situation to see what the potential problem could be. Now, the other thing we did in this case, he had 700 emails, but I said, well, what's a typical response rate? And he says, well, we have the typical 1% to 2%. I said, well, you need more than 700. We need to get more prospects. So the other thing we did is we, again, took the video. He'd already had a video done. We submitted it to the social bookmarking sites, and we picked some keywords that were different than what he had on his website. He already had a very good website that he was already ranked on for certain words. Picked some different words, put the videos out there. Here's first page of Google, and he's got 4 of his videos on the first page. And so now we're starting to get more people opt in, more people to ask for the sample kit, and we're starting to see some results. But it's not easy. It's hard to see exactly where the problem is. So here's the problems that we talked about today. We said the first one was you sound like your competition. So we can do that by creating a good offer, and if you can, a Mafia offer, something unrefusable. The second one is we have a great offer, but we can't get in to make the presentation. And as I said, that one happens in about 30% of the cases, and I gave you some ideas about how you can use the circle of leverage to try to help you to get into the right person. And not only do you tend to get in faster, but you tend to get in at a higher level with that process. We also talked about the number of prospects could potentially be a problem. We're getting in fine, but I don't have enough of them. So how can we use some free and some techniques that don't take up a lot of resources to increase the number of prospects? And then your target market. We need to make sure that your taking your offer to the best place that you can, and that you have a combination of both short-term and long-term prospects, so we get that flow going through the sales funnel just like we have in operations. And we also want to make sure that we don't get substantially worse in any other parameters. Now that we have a Mafia offer, let's be able to deliver it, and let's continue to be able to deliver it, because as soon as we can't, we're defeating the purpose of the offer. And finally, we need to be able to present our offer in a way that doesn't sound like blah, blah, blah. It's not the show up and throw up type stuff. You know, we don't put up on the screen all the company history and how we've been in business since 1952 and nobody cares. That's all about you. It's not about your competition, or not about your customer. We have to focus. We have to put ourselves in our customer's shoes and focus on them and what their issues are and present it as if that is our focus, and you should start to see a difference. So once you have this offer, and that's a great place to start, create the offer and then start to see if you have any of these other problems. And you'll know if you do any type of sales funnel management. So if you do any type of sales funnel management, you probably already know what your conversion rates, you know what the steps are, and then you start to see, well, if you have a good offer, if there is some other problem, we'll start to see it in our sales funnel management. We'll know where it is, and we should continuously improve the sales process just like we do our operational processes. We can apply drum buffer rope to the sales funnel management, just as we do in operations. And there's even software. I like to do things manually, but if you have a big enough salespeople and a big enough process, then software might make sense as well. And I put a couple recommended reading. These are books that talk about how you apply drum buffer rope to a sales process. So there's plenty of this material out there. And if you have a good offer, you start to measure and you start to see what's happening. If some of these other problems prop up, if you have them, now you know where to focus. Because just like operations, if you've solved something that wasn't a problem, you've done nothing. We have to focus our continuous improvement where we can have a bottom line impact. Whether that's on sales or in operations, it's the same. So having a good offer will certainly help. There's some people who get a great offer and I never hear from them. They don't have any of these problems. They're off and running. Life is great. I wish I had more of those. But there are other people who start to do it and they run up against one of these other problems. And the only way you're going to know is if you have a good offer to start with. So start with that. Let's get rid of the blah, blah, blah. Thank you very much. I think we probably have a couple minutes for questions, so if there's any questions, you can feel free to ask now, or I'm hanging out in the bookstore and any stories, yeah.
Presentation was excellent. However, it seemed to be focused on a lot of supplier relationships. You know, it seems like Chrysler, when Daimler-Benz has, sold them to Cerebrus, that Cerebrus is trying to take something like this and adapt it with lifetime warranties and $2.99 per gallon of gas. Since their market is the customer, the general population, and probably some key steps there that they aren't able to do to sit down and with one of the customers or prospects to figure out what they're after. Any idea how they came up with that? Did they look to China and go, hey, look, the state subsidizes gas there, our sales are doing great there, can we kind of export that idea here to the States?
How's it working? How did Chrysler develop their offer of extended warranties? Lifetime warranty and
$2.99 gallon gas.
$2.99. How they did it, I have no idea. I have no idea. Does anybody have any idea? I haven't heard anything. I try to follow when I see somebody has a good offer. I try to track it and see if it goes. But that one I'm not familiar with. I'm not sure. I haven't heard about it, so I'm assuming it hasn't taken off. Had anybody heard about that? Some of you had? Okay. I'm sorry. I don't really know. Yeah.
Any strategies for getting past the receptionist if you are just making a cold call?
Yeah. The question was, are there any strategies for getting past the gatekeeper, the receptionist, if you're making a cold call? There are some. They tend to be kind of hokey, though. You know, they're kind of cheesy. There are some ones, they work, but there are some ones, so if you see me in the bookstore, I'll try to remember what some of them are. And we used to use those, so I have a list of them. But since we were able now to use these letters to get in, we haven't had to do the cold call thing. And cold calling takes so many more resources. You know, you have to have a larger sales staff if you're going to cold call. And so we've tried to do more on the marketing end and on the getting in at the right level side, and we've moved away from doing that. But I'd be happy to share some of my really cheesy ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For the SEO stuff you mentioned, how do you stay off of Google's Blacklist, or they tend not to like people, I guess, being tricked. So is it just, are you trying to, when SEO, go through all those marketing or social networking sites to get those page ranks higher? I guess, how do you avoid, I know you're not trying to trick Google, but how do you get Google not to say, hey, we're not going to mess with you?
There's no issue with what we're doing. I mean, we're following all the rules. All we're doing is going out to these sites that let you upload the videos or bookmark them and say, here it is. And the fact that we've done it on 60 just kind of helps the process, but Google doesn't have any issue with that. And the video has to provide value. So you can put a video up there, but if nobody's going to watch it, who cares if you're on the first page? It doesn't matter. The key is that you need to have good keywords that you want to go after. You have to have a video that's relevant to those keywords, and that you have the title and the description such that people will click on it and actually watch it, and then in the video provide some value. Otherwise, you're not going to drive the traffic anyway. So I think as long as you're doing the right things and you're doing it in the right way, you're going to drive it. And we're not doing anything. We're not doing any tricks. There's nothing. You can go out and do social bookmarking on anything.
Still content-based.
It's just it's content-based. Any other questions? Excellent. I expect 10% increase in sales next year.